Hello and welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm your host, Lauren Archer, Executive Director of Kinship Earth. On behalf of our founders, Susan Davis Mora, Walter Mora, and Stephen Gomes, our advisory team, our donors, members, and extended community of kindred spirits, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce today's distinguished presenter, Dr. Elisabet Sahtouris, let's take a brief look at the KINS network phenomenon. For over 40 years, Susan Davis Mora has established over 40 KINS innovation networks of heart-centered Earth advocates who are working all over the world to raise consciousness, to transform our global economy and systems from fear and greed to generosity and love. KINS members recognize that we are part of one whole, interconnected, living system, and our greatest passion is spontaneously collaborating on projects and initiatives that are collectively ushering in the regenerative renaissance. We are playing what Buckminster Fuller called the world game, with a goal of making humans net positive to nature. And we play using the strategy of generosity, where we only win when we all win. Kinship Earth is the next evolution of KINS innovation networks, where we are building upon the foundation that Susan has already established and connecting individuals across networks to make rapid advances at this critical time. At each Kinship Earth Connections event, we introduce members of the KINS alumni community to share progress on their initiatives, help facilitate introductions and strategic alliances, and foster our growing community as one global network. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Elisabet Sahtouris, an internationally known evolution biologist and futurist, author, and sustainability consultant to businesses, government agencies, and other organizations. Dr. Satoris uses nature's principles and practice, revealed in biological evolution, as useful models for organizational change. She applies them in the corporate world, in global politics and economics, and in our efforts to create sustainable health and well-being for humanity within the larger living systems of Earth. Dr. Satoris is a member of the Evolutionary Leaders, a founding member of Rising Women, Rising World, and has co-convened 2 international symposia on the foundations of science in Hokkaido and Kuala Lumpur. She is currently professor in residence at Chaminade University School of Business and Communication. She has appeared in numerous films and is the author of Earth Dance, Living Systems and Evolution, A Walk Through Time from Stardust to Us, Biology Revisioned with Willis Harman, and her latest ebook, Gaia's Dance. So on behalf of Kinship Earth, let's all give a very warm welcome to Dr. Elisabet Sahtouris.
Aloha, everyone, from Honolulu. So can you see this slide now?
Yes.
Good. It's my keyboard metaphor for the whole universe, or for each of us, for everything in it. That everything is made of matter, energy, spirit, along a set of frequencies, because both standard model physics and quantum physics agree somehow the universe is made of vibrations. And so all of this matter, energy, spirit, endless keyboard is within a field of cosmic consciousness, all that is, God, whatever name it goes by in your world, that source of all that is. And what's interesting when you use this simple metaphor is that you can see how different sciences can come up with completely different views of the universe, depending on where on the keyboard they're looking at it from. So Western science starts in the world of matter. And it then has decided part of its official foundational worldview, its set of axioms, is that to be real, things have to be measurable. And that means using physical instruments. So they have been able to measure up into electromagnetic energy now. It used to be called a woo-woo stage show. And once it was measured, it became part of scientific reality. But physical instruments can't reach up any higher because these vibrations are dematerializing as they go up. Eastern sciences start at the opposite end of the keyboard in the realm of pure consciousness. And they derive, this is the Vedic science, which all the quantum physicists turned to explain their own findings when they broke through matter into pure whatever it was and decided perhaps it was consciousness. And so they derive the whole keyboard just by slowing the vibrations down, where you can get all the way to matter. And another thing interesting about this is that when you hear constantly this, can we integrate science and spirit, science and spirituality, I would say we should be asking, why did we take them apart? Not all sciences do. And I held several international symposia on the foundations of science to establish very clearly the foundational axioms of each one, in particular Western science, quantum science and standard model, Vedic science that the quantum theorists turn to, and Islamic science. And I made everybody at all those, at the symposia meetings, write down all the basic beliefs of their science about what a universe is and establish its foundation that way to be seen clearly. I'm spending a lot of time on this first slide because it's really not part of the slideshow, but it's my introduction. And as you all have a full description, you can look at this more from here on. I'm also going to warn you all that I'm a little fragile this morning. My heart has been acting up and is not at its normal state yet. So if I ask you to stop and breathe with me for a few minutes, we're going to do that. Okay, let me see if my control works. I'm not, the slide is not advancing. Can I click on it and make it work? Let's see, we had this going perfectly a little while ago. So it seemed, there it is. Okay, there seems to be a strange time lag. I had to go through great shenanigans to get this slideshow to work for us at all because I'm at a bit of a war with Microsoft and they don't let me do a lot of things I used to be able to do. So we're calling the show the Navigating Our Perfect Storm of Crises. We all know that we're in such crises. I live in Hawaii, and we made a replica here, the Hokulea, which this is a picture of the ancient Polynesian canoes that could sail the great oceans. They were lashed together flexibly to take great waves without breaking, which is a wonderful thing to think about. We need to be flexible now. We can't have dogmatic views about things anymore because we're in the process of reinventing things. And knowing the ways of nature, besides the resilience, were what made these tiny canoes on huge oceans actually able to navigate. They felt safe sailing these small canoes across this huge ocean. All the land masses of Earth together would fit into the Pacific. They knew they could find their way by understanding nature's ways, and they had many, many ways of doing it which I won't dwell on now, but it had to do with patterns of seaweed floating and clouds and waves and deep swells and all kinds of things. So storms arise and they have to be navigated. And that's where we are now, of course, in our current world, challenged to navigate the perfect storm of crises we've really brought on ourselves. Here in Hawaii, the word aloha contains a whole set of values of respect and reciprocity and love and caring and sharing kinds of things. But what's happened is that it's no longer the case that people share and care in the culture. Rather, as we all know, some people live well and others don't live well at all, and especially in recent years. It's really so many middle-class people have dropped into living on the streets. Why did our economy shift from caring communities in many parts of the world to obscene wealth gaps as we see them now? Well, as Hazel Henderson would have told us, economists are trained to ignore the obvious facts of human nature. And I'm going to let you read the words yourselves to keep my amount of talking down. We have this tyranny of the quarterly bottom line, putting profits ahead of people and planet. So this is what we've been doing. Huge shopping malls. We are seen as consumers. It's our main role in the global economy. Well, evolution biology has looked into a deep past that can shed light on futures. That's why I became an evolution biologist, to see whether the past could light up something about our future. We all learned this story, that evolution is based on fierce competition. Archaea are the ancient bacteria-like creatures that first populated Earth and were the only creatures of Earth for fully half of evolution, about 2 billion years. So they had a lot of time to evolve amazing things. No other creatures, only bacteria, doing all of these things. It's really quite amazing, because no other creatures since them, until humans, have done this kind of inventive stuff on the planet. What I saw in evolution was a maturation cycle that takes us from competition to cooperation, where you begin with a unity, like the early Earth's crust was pretty homogeneous. And when the bacteria came about, suddenly we had individual being. Coming out within that unity, we had individuation, which it turns out, as the cycle repeats over and over in nature, always produces tensions and conflicts. It's a time of creative expansion. And eventually, some of those tensions and conflicts are negotiated. And when they get resolved, you have cooperative schemes arising. Even though this is a time when everything is expanding and trying to reproduce as fast as possible and elbowing each other out of the way, kind of, to do it, you can actually, through enough cooperation, build a new unity at a larger size level. And in the case of the bacteria, it was the nucleated cells that we're all made of that were their bacterial cooperatives. And the most important lesson that comes out of understanding this cycle is that Creative cooperation is the mature part of the cycle. It is cheaper to feed your enemies than to kill them. It takes less energy. And if you take one thing away from this talk, that's the one. It's cheaper to feed your enemies than to kill them. Why are we still in the mode of solving human problems by killing each other, beating each other up? It's wonderful that other evolution biologists have discovered that we are a true cooperative social species. There are more and more of them now. I love this picture of the ants all supporting each other to get across a gap. We're in a gap in a way between cultures. We live in human city hives by the millions, cooperating all day long. We stop at traffic lights. We don't hit each other on the sidewalk as we mill around. We pay at the supermarket. We're just cooperative all day long. And the main thing I worry about in our cities at present is that 13 of the 20 largest ones are at sea level, which is a bit dangerous now. This, in fact, is Honolulu. So you can see we are constantly still building more high rises on fragile coastland. Anyway, one of the wonderful things about nature that we can learn from in our politics and economics, especially politically, is that nature is profoundly conservative with things that work well. And it's progressive and changes what does not work. This is a friendly division of labor. This is what has to go on all the time. Constantly, there are negotiations between your cells. Each of your cells must meet its self-interest, but so does each organ have to meet its self-interest, and so does each organ system, and so does each body as a whole need to meet self-interest. So there's always this negotiation between individual and collective in the whole holarchy of size levels. That is why your body functions well. And it's a very ethical system. Nobody in the body complains when all the resources have to go to one part. I'm expecting lots of resources going to my heart right now. So why should we vote every few years on whether to be conservatives or radical change agents, progressives? That's crazy. Why are we allowing ourselves to be separated? Think of that unity of the keyboard, the universe, our oneness. We're getting our oneness now, but we have to translate it into our politics, into our economics. Let's look at the words ecology and economy. They both come from the Greek word ekos, which means household at different levels. They had a holarchy of households from family to community all the way up to global economy. Ecology is ecos put together with logos, the design of the household. Economy is ecos together with nomos, law, or how it's managed, the rule of the household. We have made our economy superior to the ecology, our ecosystems. We have seen them as resources for human use. And we have done a great deal of damage in the process. So if you turned this upside down so that the ecology, the ecosystems were the most important thing and our economics had to be fit into it without ruining it, without wrecking it, without harming it, you would get a wise household, an ecosophy, a wisdom household. You see, it's my job on the planet is to make very complex things simple. And so This slide is a way of very simply showing what's wrong and what we have to do about it. Hawaii had an ecosophy. It had an economy that was what we would nowadays call bioregional. Every farm had its boundaries as the little streams that ran down the mountains. All islands have high ground and shore, right? And Hawaii is made up of islands, of course. So each farm had the forested upper regions, the gardened middle regions, and the seashore for the seafood, the seaweed and the shellfish and the fish. And the streams separated the different ones. That would be a bioregional approach to economics. We can all recreate such ecosophies if we paddle together in the canoe of values such as those in Hawaii, which were common to many advanced indigenous cultures. The Haudenosaunee, whom we call the Iroquois in northeastern United States and parts of Canada, as we now scratch the lines across the world to make nations. They had such wonderful values, and that we would call what they practiced an amazing democracy, and perhaps the only one ever to be on earth. They had brought 6 nations together under a great law of peace. And if the chief, who was chosen by grandmothers, made a rule or a new edict to do something, if somebody didn't think it was good and disobeyed it, they would say, I don't agree to this. And there was no punishment for disobeying the order. There was new meetings called to see whether whether the chief had gotten something wrong and wasn't serving the people the way had been promised to the grandmothers they would be. So we all have to navigate now through this perfect storm of crises we've brought on ourselves. We have to build lifeboats by collaborating, by taking action. What kind of lifeboats are we going to build? The solutions abound, and I don't have to tell you that the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. And, we have ways of doing things differently to produce our energy. We know that organic agriculture is healthy, restores soil, water, makes jobs, and outperforms high-tech agriculture. That came from a UN study that was done years ago. And of course, when I was a child, now being 86 years old, all the food I ate as a child was organic, which seems to surprise some people who don't realize that. They say, oh, where did you live? And I say, the entire world ate organic food and only organic food at that time. There were no farm chemicals yet. We didn't have the word organic because it was simply food. So, whoops. The Polynesian sailors told me once when I was concerned about, how are we going to fix this world? How do we survive in this perfect storm of crises? And what they said to me was, if all else fails, stand tall in your canoe until you can see the land, see your destination. What does that mean? Have any of you ever had, seen yourself on a Hawaiian beach during a dull lecture? Are you able to move your consciousness around? Can you, if you're feeling like you're at the bottom of a dark well, stand tall, raise your consciousness up to where you can look down on this human drama, slide yourself up the keyboard into the realm of consciousness, spirit, dream, imagination, all of those things that we cannot measure, but that are very real parts of you, your dream world in parallel with your waking world every 24 hours. stand tall in your canoe until you can see your destination. Look down on this human drama and see where things aren't working and where things are working. And if you've been kind of banging your head against a wall, trying to get something done that you think should be done, rethink it, withdraw from that. See if there's another easier path where you don't have to fight so hard, where you can find more people, where you can be an attractor for others to do things together, because we need everybody. We need the techies, we need the biologists, we need the ministers, we need the poets and artists, we need those who can fix things and clean house. All of it is all needed to build the world that we dream of. So take that perspective occasionally. Take the deep breath. And take that perspective from high as you can, and then come back down to see where you can move best next. Don't be caught at the bottom of the well. Rise to look at the big picture. And now I would like all of you, please, to unmute for a moment, if that's permitted, Lauren. Can they all unmute and say this poem together? Can we do that?
Go ahead and unmute yourselves. And so we're going to read what's at the bottom of the screen all at once. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Starting with even after?
Yes, this is the poem by Hafiz. So everybody say it with me. Even
After
all this time,
the Sabbath
never once
once
said
said
to
earth, oh me. Look what happens
what happens
like
love
light
lights
lights
up the whole sky.
Lights up the whole sky.
Thank you all. Thank you all. This is my latest book. There are others, you can find them easily. This is a kind of storytelling version.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, and I see that Michael has his hand up, and I want to mention that if Susan and Walter were here, they would recognize. I think, I suspect that's Aletta with you, Michael. And I introduced Susan and Walter and Aletta and Michael in South Africa. Susan and Walter, of course, in Ecuador, because both of them are living on biodynamic farm communities.
Wow.
So Michael, what's on your mind?
Elisabet, I just wanted to say that my daughter, when she knew that we were going on this call today, wanted me to show this picture to you and asked you if you remembered it. Thank you so much for the work that we did earlier, because this very dramatic picture transformed into the beautiful version of the canoes.
Our perfect storm of crises.
Exactly. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hey, good to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. What a delight, Elisabet, to have you shine your light on this amazing moment of humanity. It's such a privilege to listen and read your inspired works. This wildlife refuge exists because of common friends. Gifford and Liva were founders of the reserve so many years ago. and their kids, the Pinchot family and their kids, active in the gorge in all the many ways that you would hope. I was so inspired reading your work about the evolution of cooperation, and I think one of the most important and yet to be achieved collaborative linkages is with the unborn. How do you look forward to the value, the kinds of value that you are describing as a future consequence, and make that possible, real, in a collaborative way for the young people who need to be the stewards that keep these living systems keep the canoe steady in these complicated waters. My sense is that there is a unique opportunity for collaboration between the money-based economy that is descended into the manipulation of scarcity as a value proposition, as opposed to the natural model, which is the distribution of abundance. And the science community has the power to create the kinds of measurement that would enable the finance community to build that bridge, so that it's rather than creating more and more scarcity and squeezing everybody into more and more deeper into the corner, by partnering with science and finance, I think there's an opportunity for communities to capture the value of rebuilding. I don't just mean putting band-aids on broken systems, but rather the value that comes from not doing stupid things and starting building systems that are truly life cycle clean and regenerative. But it's only an investment model if you can tap the deep wealth that's delivered to the future. So that's a complicated set of ideas, but I know you think a lot about it. And I'm curious, who do you think in the world of science, of which you have such a deep knowledge and so many friendships and such a unique leadership role, who would you suggest might be able to hold the conversation that bridges finance and science? For instance, Jane Lubchenco, I think, is in a really special place, particularly in the current administration, as a deep envisioning scientist, but also one who's very sophisticated in the political space. But I'm sure there are many, many others. I'm thinking that what we really need to do is create, and this conversation has been held in this forum before, but I think what we're after is a framework that reinvents the current economy as one oriented towards the generation of abundance, as opposed to the manipulation of scarcity. And the only way to make that a possible opportunity that can be actualized in the money world is to go into a deep time partnership where that collaborative relationship is deep into the future based on what science can measure. So I guess where I'm headed with this crazy question is, who are the other scientists that have your depth of spirit, and as well as your incredibly sophisticated knowledge of science, that might lead that kind of a transformation? And I say that because I have a lot of young people here who would love to go to work for that for that team. Was that complicated enough?
That was definitely complicated, Hank. And I want to say kudos to the Pinchos for having created one of the very first alternative MBA programs in the world. And I had the privilege of doing a little teaching in it. And I had the privilege again of meeting one of my ex-students from that program here in Honolulu, Dorothy the pilot. She's a very senior pilot with United Airlines. And she lives right here and not very far from me on the same island. And she has flown over Greenland for many years, watching the ice melt happen there. Anyway, I don't know very many scientists who talk about finance and science in the same breath, Hank. Also, before I answer that question, I also want to acknowledge that Susan and Walter are here now, and say Susan and Walter, Michael Haupt and Aletta are on to as well today, and that's a bit of networking. You know, Lynn Margulis, the wonderful woman who worked with James Lovelock, said evolution did not proceed by combat, but by networking. So this is an instance of networking in our midst today. Just want to point that out. Anyway, I've been looking a lot at finance lately because there is a move afoot in the world today to end all cash currencies and to only have a world of digital currencies where people can be very much controlled through them. It started with, the Chinese social credit scores on their iPhones, and then digital currencies. And even in the midst of the war in Ukraine, they are rolling out apps in which those who behave properly, have social credit scores, can get digital currencies for food and medicine, and those who do not behave according to what's wanted of them do not. There are very, very outrageous things going. Ukraine has never been a democracy, and I don't want to get any further into that. What I do want to talk about, science and money, to me, what I flash on right away is my body's currency. My body's economy is run on a currency called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And it is basically within the cell, the mitochondria are the bankers. These are once free-living bacteria that became residents of the big cooperative cells we're made of. And they issue something that's like a stored value debit card to spend into the cell's economy, catalyzing all the reactions necessary. And when that energy load is used up, it's taken back to the bank and reloaded. It is not charging you interest. It is not asking anything for the money. It is doing this because the money is a way of running an economy. And it is not about making profits and creating a society, an unequal society of rich and poor. It's about making it run. And of course, we can all invent alternative currencies that work in these ways. And there are many of them. For years, I followed all of the first ones came out of Ithaca with its time bank, basically. And there are just many ways of doing it. I am advocating here in Hawaii for the state to issue a currency that's a local currency that is given away freely so that people can start trading it, where all of the businesses have to accept this currency, but it has no value off islands. So it can run in parallel to the dollar economy, and it could bootstrap our economy overnight if the government of the state of Hawaii would announce and give away this currency and say you can pay your taxes in it. That would immediately legitimize it. So there are things that we can do, Hank. And I think we'd better move along. I don't know how much time we have. Lauren, I guess as moderator, you might have to butt in here and stop us from talking too long.
That's always the challenge, because we would love to have time for every single person in the room to speak their voice into the conversation. And we will do an order as hands raised and talk as time allows. So thank you so much, Hank. Thanks for that great question. And I see Brian is next on the list. So Brian, feel free to unmute yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren. Elisabet, would you go back to the beginning of your presentation where you talked about, you made the assumption that there wasn't a division between spirituality and science and talking to groups. So my question is, just refresh me on where that was. And secondly, is anybody talking in terms of there was not a division in the beginning?
Yes, I take your second question first. I think there are people who are talking about it. Anyone who comes from the Vedic science or the Taoist science perspective will tell you that you are not a body with a mind and soul and spirit or whatever. You are a body, mind, spirit. The Taoists had that same progression of frequencies from matter, energy, spirit. So this keyboard represents the whole universe. All of the what's vibrating? The sea of cosmic consciousness, right? What the Greeks called the plenum, the great potential, the chaos, chaos in Greek, that becomes cosmos, cosmos being defined as the patterned universe, all of the patterns that evolve within that matter, energy, spirit continuum. Because it's a continuum, you can't have a piano keyboard if you just, there's no point in having a piano keyboard if you're only going to play in the middle range of the board, or only in the low keys, or only in the high keys. Angels only can play in the high keys. That's why some say they're lined up for human bodies. So that's what I mean by all of us are matter, energy, spirit. One of my best friends, who perceives on many levels, worked long and hard to figure out what's the point of being human. And what she came to was, we must bring cosmic love all the way down to our physical toes, not just understand it intellectually, feel it in our hearts, but literally embody it, embody that cosmic love that we want to have everybody function on in a future where we get our unity. More and more and more people every day, I get webinars about unity consciousness. It's everywhere now. Well, it's not everywhere, but you can find a great deal of it all over the planet.
Thank you very much. The way you said it helped me make some links. The Vedic is India, the Taoist is China, and I was just watching the physicist Michio Kaku talk about Pythagoras and numbers and string theory, and that pulls in the Greeks, all of those 2,500 years ago.
Yes.
And so appreciate your mentioning it. Thanks.
I do. I think Michio Kaku, by the way, doesn't understand the whole keyboard. I think he's...
Thank you.
I'm not sure there's a limit to the speed of light. That's something that we do in Western physics. You see, we have to measure everything to understand the universe. And I think this is an analog universe, not a digital one. So the keyboard, in a way, is a digital representation, but the vibrations, the waves on the ocean do not have edges between them, right?
I appreciate your adding the analog universe view. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, one of Kinship Earth's founding board members is up next, Dr. Stephen Gomes. Stephen, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, Elisabet, enjoying your presentation today. I'm wondering if you've ever heard of seeds, the regenerational cryptocurrency that's the opposite of what you're describing happening with China. We know about that. And we know that that's the sort of the dark side of crypto. But there's also a very good side to it that's been happening for 4 years, and seeds is a very excellent example of that.
Absolutely agree with you. It's the only cryptocurrency that I think is a really good one.
Yeah, so I'm very, very involved in that. I'm on the Seeds Commons. I'm also on the predecessor that created Seeds, the Haifa group. And we're working very, very hard to bring about a way of being on the planet where human beings are net positive to nature the way that we know we can be, and rise up above the embedded idea of predatory capitalism, which is what we have now, that depends upon an old idea, patriarchal idea that we must create systems that are competitive and based on scarcity and based upon competition. That's simply just not true. And if you look on nature, you can see that there's way more powerful ways for human beings to be on the planet. So that's one thing you answered already. The other thing is I was the youngest pilot in the United States at one point, and I'm writing an article about the 2 women that taught me to fly. And I'd be very interested in meeting your pilot friend at United Airlines, if that would be possible to put us in connection with each other.
Well, I'll make a note of that.
All right. And as that networking happens, I want to just give voice to some of the things in the chat. So Douglas Bonar said donut economics is a good model. So thank you for that. And Pam mentioned that Tom Butler, who is in this call, set up Astria 22 years ago to examine how to balance economics, ecology, and ethics. So an invitation, Tom, if you wanted to make a comment about that. Sandra mentioned that Nassim Haramein is a physicist who's doing some great work, believes that he's on the island of Hawaii. Elisabet, you're mentioning, do you know him? He does great work. And then Dr. Carmen Ortiz had asked a question about the name of the university that was offering alternative MBAs. So just giving some voice, and there's lots of great comments in the chat. So I see that Tom has his hand up. Tom, would you feel free to unmute yourself? And thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom.
Did that work? And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Very
you.
well.
Well, yeah. Hi, Pam. I'd rather keep quiet, but it's an area I've got a lot of interest in. Thank you very much, Elisabet. I've met you at Be the Change, and you've inspired me for the whole time that I've been heading in this direction, so thank you. So if we're copying nature, we need to look to energy, and energy is the currency of nature, so it should be the currency of our interactions at a certain level. And if we look at the whole body of energy, the one thing we need to face is that we're going to have to reduce our consumption significantly, those of us that are on this call, in a very short amount of time, if we're going to balance the ecological needs. So I think the financial systems, the economic systems that we have, will have to be completely rewritten. At the moment, capitalism is about ownership, which gives control. No, that's not working, is it? It's a pyramid of power. So if we can move up that keyboard and get to those altruistic beings that we are, then maybe if ownership was about responsibility, people wouldn't be so eager to have so much, because when you're responsible for something, it's a different game than when you just tell people what to do. Anyway, thank you very much for hearing my 2 cents.
I'm happy to hear your 2 cents, and maybe we should get into a little bit about how should things look, what can we do? And of course, I think that Susan and Walter's biodynamic farm community and the one with Aletta and Michael in South Africa are the right way to go, because we must build these communities of caring and sharing at the local level. Maximum local self-sufficiency. You know, Hawaii imports the vast bulk of its energy and food across the biggest ocean in the world. And that's not at all necessary and not at all sustainable. But the forming of these communities is happening. We have the global eco-village network. We have examples like in Sri Lanka, the Sarvodaya movement, Sarvodaya, 15,000 small villages and hamlets, all using a money system to bootstrap each other in their own money system, kind of thing. It's actually using the regular currency, but they have a banker who's doing it with them in very small amounts. It's like micro lending. And we have in Spain, the Mondragon cooperatives, which are urban cooperatives. Over almost half a century ago, a Catholic priest going around to the bars or wherever young people were saying, how would you build a society that was neither capitalist nor communist, but based on loving human values? And they did it. They built it. It is still going. It is thriving. It got through the 2008 crisis better than the rest of Spain because it had a bank of its own as well as a national bank. And so we have all over the world, we have these examples of people forming viable communities based on caring and sharing. The best thing to me about COVID that came out of that was elevating caregivers to heroic status. By the way, I have many doctor friends who have healed thousands of COVID patients, and one doctor family in Germany just is checking out moving to Zanzibar, to Zimbabwe, to the island of Zanzibar. And last night we were Zooming across the planet. I love technology that can do things like that, communications. And it turned out they don't even talk about COVID. Only 3% of the population was vaccinated. They never had a problem with it. They never considered it very problematic at all. We're not told that kind of thing, you know? So we're living in a world now where information is very manipulated, very biased, where people who do good scientific research are sidelined and called accused of spreading misinformation. So we're challenged now to use our brains, to use our abilities to look into things, to think holistically. It's why we need big picture thinking and why we need to understand how to build local caring and sharing communities. Energy was brought up. I'm in love with the design for the hydrogen clipper. You can go to a website called h2clipper.com, and you can see this design, which within the next few years will actually be built, where hydrogen is used not only to lift the dirigible, but to propel it forwards. And it's an amazing technology, as you can read on that website. I hope to live to be able to ride in one of them. I like to think of them as sky canoes because they're needle nose pointed at both ends and have the little jet engines on as though the paddles are dipping. They look like you're looking up onto canoes, and I would love to see a chain of small ones cruising the Pacific Islands so that we can get to each other. They, by the way, fly at almost airplane speed, like 191 miles an hour if they're fully loaded. They carry huge amounts of cargo. Anyway, I could go on and on about the many things there are, but maybe some of you could pop up with just some quick suggestions for things you want to see in the world we're building now. And children were mentioned. Obviously, we need a whole new way of educating children. And every aspect of society, the glory is we get to reinvent this show because the big guys are unsustainable, which means cannot last. And we can't wait around for them to implode as they will. They're dependent, for one thing, on the internet and the iPhones to control you with their currency through the iPhones. And if you're not put that iPhone down and start growing your own food, they can't control you at all. So we have the leeway to get in there and grow our plants in the cracks of their crumbling edifice.
So true. And I see we've got 3 hands up, and I'm not quite clear on the order. The way I saw it on my screen was George was first, and then I'm not sure between Stuart and Carmen. I want to introduce George Orbelian, who is the chair of our advisory committee for Kinship Earth. And George is well connected with a lot of solutionaries, and that's part of what we are doing here together, is connecting the solutions with the people who can help support those solutions. So George, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. I look forward to reviewing the video. Thank you for your great work. I'm on the board of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and I work with a guy named Tom Chi, who has a company called At One Ventures. It's a $150 million fund. Initially, he looked at over 3,200 different businesses, picked out about 80 to invest in that would change the world, and invested in them. He's got about 26 in his portfolio that are thriving now and bringing in 64% returns. So I've put the name in the chat, and we can certainly work with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and your work is beautifully aligned. And I wondered if you had, in your experience, encountered Bucky, if you had any Buckminster Fuller stories.
Unfortunately, I never actually met him. I did meet other people who were involved in the Bucky Fuller Institute here. Of course, George Campbell's wife was still here when I moved to Hawaii. And anyway, I'm sorry I don't have any personal Bucky stories, but of course I'm a big fan.
Great, thank you. And I also put, in regards to the energy question, geothermic solution, which is harvesting the heat from the earth, and is created by a friend named Puat Moncars, who's been with a company called Exponent since the late 60s that analyzes global scale disasters. So that's in the chat as well. So thank you very much for your work.
Great. Yes, we have all those alternative energies are possible, and there's a lot of invention going on here in Hawaii. There's someone desalinating seawater to clean water on a boat powered by solar energy, and then piping the fresh water that it makes onto the shore wherever it's needed. And just lots of solutions. Solutionaries is a wonderful word, by the way. I love it.
Yeah, anything we can do, Elisabet, to allow the Kinship Network and Buckminster Fuller Institute, your work, to coalesce and bring these solutions to the forefront, because I think people don't know what's possible.
Yes, it's really, a lot of my work right now is focused on trying to figure out what can we stop all mining and build the future just on recycling the things that we've already, built and dug up. Can we recycle the existing plastic? Can we recycle the existing concrete, steel, and glass? Do we have to do any further damage to the planet? What kinds of appropriate technology can we get into the future in our nice little farming communities, but can we also have enough technology? Would we be able to build a light bulb? One of my favorite things on earth is the Red Flag Canal in China, which was the seventh wonder of the world, built by young kids with no resources whatsoever in a valley that was dying of thirst. Can't get into it now, but I learned that it's not money, but motivation. When people are threatened with dying because they don't have something, they get very creative, right? And so let's do it now before this whole show collapses.
Indeed. Oh boy, such great information. All right, so I'm not sure who was next, Carmen or Stuart.
It was Carmen. Carmen's next.
Go ahead, Carmen. And then I do want to just do a quick time check. We are at, we've got a little less than half an hour left. And so if we can keep our questions brief, and then I do want to invite Susan and Walter to make sure that they can speak into the room. So Carmen, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Satoris, for this beautiful, beautiful knowledge, inspirational presentation. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you to expand, please, on something that really hit home for me, and it's called Ecosophy, what you called Ecosophy, wisdom household. And I was on my phone here looking on Google for wisdom household, couldn't find it. I'm assuming that you made that term up, which is absolutely fantastic. I had the privilege of studying corporate finance at Columbia Business School, MBA. I want to know about that alternative MBA as well, if you would, share it in the chat at some point. And the reason was because I was interested in personal finance. And I went to business school to learn about personal finance, not possible. So I learned corporate finance. And then after being in Wall Street for 3 years, I then started my own personal finance company, personal in financial planning. And now I want to do something about what's going on with the economic paradigm, bringing a new paradigm for personal financial planning. And I wanted to please hear your thoughts about Ecosophy, and what would you say about Ecosophy to myself and any other personal financial planner in the world.
Well, thank you for that, and that's wonderful work. I did not invent the word ecosophy. There were two people who used it before me, and I have a whole article about it. I don't know whether you were here for the slideshow. You might have missed it if you were late. But there is a slide, and you'll see it in the recording, that describes the ecology and the economy and the relationship between them, which is that we have made ecology, our ecosystem, subservient to our economy. And that if we turn that upside down and fit our economy into the ecosystems, the ecology, that would be the wisdom household. Ecos means household in Greek. So household at all holarchic levels involved here. And it's so I try to make complex things as simple as possible for people to understand that has been a huge error in our ways of seeing nature as resources for human use, rather than seeing ourselves, as most indigenous cultures have, as kind of little brother among all the other beings of nature. The tree behind me is in a park here in Honolulu, named after one of our queens when this was still a kingdom. And trees, just as an example, have not only our 5 human senses of hearing, seeing, touch, taste, smell, distributed all over their bodies rather than in organs like we have the eyes and ears and stuff. And we have already measured 12 senses that they have for detecting different kinds of energies in the world that we don't have. So I like to say, as an evolution biologist, that animals are plants that lost their chloroplasts and couldn't make food in place, and that everything else that evolved in animals was about perceiving food supplies, acquiring them, claws and stuff, running after them, bones and muscles, consuming and processing them, digestive tracts, and so on. So who's the superior being if we're going to be hierarchical? The point is that we're all in this planet together. I have wonderful tree friends who have done me great favors, actually, by communing. I like to also distinguish between communion and communication. You commune with a tree. Our cells commune with each other. They don't need a language for communication. Our bodies do both. We have electrical and chemical communication, and we have direct information exchange called communion. They play the whole keyboard. My point all through this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I got it.
Beautiful. All right. So now I'd like to invite Stuart Valentine to ask his question, and then we'll turn it over to Susan and Walter to say a few words.
Great.
Aloha,
Thanks.
Stuart.
Aloha, aloha. Last time I talked to you, you were out in the middle of the Mediterranean, I think, enjoying.
I'm an island addict.
You are an island addict. Well, you know, what was that original book by Garrett Hardin, Spaceship Earth? You've always took that to heart and always have created a vital island wherever you live. That's quite inspiring. I wanted just to make some comments and then have a question, Elisabet, about just, I've had the great good fortune of soaking you up and Barbara Marx Hubbard and Hazel Henderson's work and Susan all along the way. And in each case, you know, the filtering down, the message is the same, which is we are integrated whole beings that somehow found our way into a paradigm of separation. And so that, I mean, all the tools we're working on, cryptocurrencies, you know, local community work, etc. I have a sense that we're kind of in the exercise, if I observe the last 40 years, of, is it Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill only to slide back down? Because fundamentally, I think even, you know, all of us are experimenting, working on this, but fundamentally we lack a shared unity experience that allows us to get out of the struggle of pushing that boulder up the hill. And I'm curious about your thoughts about releasing old paradigm and allowing kind of what is it going to take for us to live as nature, which all of us are basically, you know, our compass needle is saying we have to go this way. And yet collectively, I think we're still stuck in a mindset of separation. I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, yes, and my first slide after the keyboard one was about the canoes that the Polynesian sailors sailed and still sail now are flexible. They're not bolted together into pieces. They are lashed together so that they can ride the waves flexibly, right? And that's another wonderful metaphor for the way we have to be now. I used to teach workshops on worldviews and ask people, you know, some basic questions about humans and God and life and, you know, things, and say, what did you believe about this when you were 10 years old? Then when you were 20 years old, when you were 30 years old, if they were older people, you could go on. And I looked at what is it that changes people's worldviews. And invariably, after many of these workshops, I could see it was always a crisis of some kind, a personal crisis, whether it was a divorce or an illness or a house burning down or whatever. It seems to take a crisis to shake up our worldviews. So I started teaching, and you can do this with children, to teach them to grow a garden of beliefs, to recognize that you run your life by your beliefs. And that you can see these as plants, as flowers of different kinds, of shrubs, of medicinal herbs, of whatever, you know, of food supplies, a food forest for your garden, whatever. And think about how occasionally some die out without you even thinking about it. And some you uproot and throw out because you found something you'd rather have in place of it. So see it as a work in progress all your life, that we don't want to become inflexible, closed-minded. We always, I talk as much as possible to people with political beliefs that are opposed to mine, just for the practice of conflict resolution. I'm a huge believer in conflict resolution. I believe that the best conflict resolution people in the world could put Xi Jinping and Putin and Biden at a table together and have them come out without losing face with some kind of an agreement. But we're still in this empire building mode we've been in for 6,000 years now, about where we're duking it out as the way of solving problems. And that's just so obsolete.
Yeah. The belief system is the thing to unwind. I have this very compelling idea that I try to refresh moment to moment of living as nature, informed by the intelligence of nature, because I recognize that fundamentally I have been informed, educated, and cultured into the systems that we humans have created. And it's a very interesting journey to kind of just give up, totally release and allow in the face of just all these myriad topical symptoms of the underlying disease, which I fundamentally believe is this idea of separation, that I am not connected. I put in the chat section the book that Susan Davis and Louis Botlink, Louis on this, myself, Stephen Loving, a KINS group wrote, titled Imagining Philanthropy for Life. And the subtitle is The Whole System Approach to Transforming Finance and Growing True Wealth. And the idea there is, how do we find our way into just frankly, a new cosmology, a reacquainting ourselves with the cosmology of the universe, such that we feel at home in ourselves, versus, the anxiety that comes of a persistent and regular message of being separate. And I think that takes a daily diet of attention. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. And you mentioned our beloved founder, Susan Davis Mora, who is on this call. And so I'd like to give Susan a chance to say a few words. So welcome, Susan.
Please.
Thank you.
And I'll actually just tell you quickly a series of incredible miracles that have happened in the last 15 years when I was called by Penny Kelly 15 years ago. And in 1 minute, she said, Susan, I'm not allowed to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You've worked so hard on these kids' investment networks that you're going to die within a year. And then she hung up. So I stopped everything. I stopped everything and waited for further instructions from the universe. And she said I was going to die in a year. 6 months into that year, I was given, I was able to help a woman save her business that was very, very important for ecology. And as a result, she gifted me with a house she just built in a remote place in Ecuador. It's always been a sacred village. And she gave us 2 weeks there. So my husband and I came, we bought a house in 8 days, and we've been there for the last 15 years. And here, one miracle after another has unfolded. So jumping to the end of the story, there is a valley in near Vilcabamba, an hour from Vilcabamba, and it's been sacred forever. And I was in a group that had a number of the top indigenous leaders in the world in it. And we were choosing a place we'd have our annual meeting. And we told them that we just wound up in Ecuador in this sacred place. And they said, oh my God, that's where we have to have the meeting, because the land that you have bought is extremely sacred land that has been defiled, and it has to be restored. And we have to teach you because you won't know how to do it. And we were like, yes. And that's what happened. The whole group came and we did lots of ceremony. We meanwhile had built a spirit house that we do ceremony in every morning, as long as we also do it afternoons and evenings too. It's a very electrified spirit house for sure. And all of these new designs for transforming the village we're in, which is a very sacred, very famous village, we're just finding one kindred spirit after another that feels that that's their life mission. They're going to do that. So here in Vilcabamba, we have a tremendous collaboration between the locals and the foreigners, and all kinds of magical things are happening. And I don't want to take more time, but I'll just tell you that at our farm, it's extremely sacred land, and we are creating a whole new kind of economy that's based on no profiteering at all. It's all collaboration and integration, and we're using biodynamics. It's already the healthiest food in the world, people say, and we're just having a wonderful time doing good. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Susan, for being the attractor field that has brought so many people to this room and together today. I put a little note in the chat. Susan and Walter's farm, which is called Finca Sagrada, stands for Sacred Land Farm, is part of a regenerative eco-village pilot project through the Seeds ecosystem. And so there are opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. So if anyone is interested, please reach out to us. All right, so we've got a few more hands up. We are down to just 10 minutes. So Stuart, is that a new hand up, or is that from before? Is that from before? Okay, I see Hank's got his hand up again. So Hank, go ahead. You can unmute, please.
Quickly, but importantly, I think Stuart, in his characteristically humble way, failed to point out that he actually is a very powerful example of solving the problem that he described, which is how do folk who are just trying to live their lives connect to Mother Nature and a life of stewardship. And his and I'm surprised, Stuart, you didn't give yourself a plug or Silt a plug, but the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust is actually an incredibly beautiful example of how a community can help young aspiring family farmers connect to the land by capturing a lease agreement with a land trust that is assembled by good-hearted, thoughtful, far-seeing people such as Stuart Valentine. But it does, I think, point at the gorilla in the room that we don't often want to talk about, which is the fact that the money system is holding all the land in a prisoner relationship. And it's not, you don't just stop paying the rent on Friday because you suddenly decided that it wasn't a sustainable model, because if you do, you're a homeless person, and we know that's not an upgrade. So getting a, we call that the trapped equity problem. How do you relocate your physical and professional and institutional structures out of the exhaustive paradigm and into the regenerative one? Stuart's model is very beautiful and very powerful, but it goes back to the question I asked Elisabet about if we can't use science to project the larger value so that finance can get at that larger value, we're kind of stuck. So I really think that's a big issue. And I love the metabolism economy approach. The square meal is a pretty good unit of usefulness, and it can be produced very close to where we're all sitting if we give it a shot, like the student sitting next to me who produced an amazing bowl of basil sprouts just from thinning the generous garden in which we were working earlier today. So kudos, Stuart, for being so humble, and thank you for creating the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. May there be more of the above.
Well, I didn't create it, but I'm an active participant in it. And it really just goes back to what Elisabet said earlier, which is, I think part of this paradigm is a very deep commitment to relocalization and our participation in that local community solution set.
Thank you. And Stuart has a video on our website, as does Hank. They both gave presentations about some of their rich philosophy. So to dive deeper, go to kinshipearth.org and check out our videos page. Thank you both. All right, I see George has his hand up again, and then Michael and Theory and Aletta, and then we're going to be coming to a close. So we're going to stop questions after that. So go ahead, George.
So thanks, Elisabet, about mentioning trees and other life and the wider range of senses and sensitivity they have. And I was thinking about how, we see parts of the spectrums. We hear parts, we see parts of the spectrums. And how we look at things, what we perceive actually influences, our ability to embrace just how interconnected we are. And then we start thinking about how fear and the fight or flight system is utilized to control people. And then we look also at the situation with puberty and how our bodies change, and we have to refamiliarize ourselves with the new metabolisms we have. And when you start looking at the Krebs cycle, which traces all of these metabolic functions, and stoichiometry, from the science is just getting richer and richer. And I think you're absolutely on the right track in utilizing the metabolic system with how we interact with the planet.
Thank you for that. I like that you spoke of adolescence because, again, the maturation cycle is there. We expect the teenager to be feisty and combative, and And then we expect that they will transform themselves into a cooperative citizen adult, right? So it's always there. Once you see that cycle, you can see it everywhere.
Beautiful. Yes, the maturation is a theme that's come up quite a bit. Okay, before we do our final thank yous, Michael, Thierry, and Aletta, you've got your hand up. Closing thoughts, questions?
Yes, but first of all, first time I meet you really, and thank you very much. I'm not a very good speaker because I'm not an English speaking person, but I wanted to ask Elisabet, because I come from a Shaolin background and African background, and we are very, very sensitive to sound. And what Elisabet to me make me resonate is the fact that sound is an energy, especially when you see the keyboard. It's an incredible rhythm and melody at the same time. And so I sort of wanted to understand, like the practice of mantras repetitively in our brain change completely our energy. For example, everybody tonight was talking about something that was written in 1776, saying that the wealth of nation is in the value of nature and the nature of value. And then when you start to repeat this, there is a form of integration in your whole body by becoming through the sound, whether you say it in French or in English or maybe in Chinese, there is something that is an energy. And I wanted to ask you the question, maybe this is an energy, we must look at it, because that's the way we talk to each other, maybe through mantras and things like, I don't know. I'm just, yeah.
Well, I love your comment on sound. In the beginning was the word. It comes up over and over in many of the world's religions that sound comes before light even. And I puzzled over that a long time, but Hazrat Inayat Khan explained it to me in his book, and I met his son Pierre much later, that cosmic sound is not like earth sound in the sense that it doesn't require a medium in which to operate like air. Sound travels on airwaves in our human world, but cosmic sound is way up high on the keyboard at the very upper ends. And so I look forward. My younger brother died last year, and he was a musician and inventor and stuff. And I immediately got it that he was now making music of the spheres kind of sound at a whole other level. So thank you, Thierry, for bringing up sound. And one of my networking enterprises, as I mentioned earlier, was, of course, to bring you and Aletta and Michael together with Susan and Walter as having biodynamic farm communities in Ecuador and in South Africa. And networking is just how life is. Remember, Lynn Margulis saying, evolution did not proceed by combat, but by networking. And so that's the way we build the future, by networking. And I would urge you to make sure that we figure out how to keep our communities in touch, even if the internet fails, because that will be the downfall of the big system. Let it not be the downfall of ours. Maybe we'll have to go back to shortwave radio, or one of the inventions my brother made in the 1940s. He had a shortwave radio. They wouldn't give him a ham license because he was only 10 years old, but he had built that. And in sound, he had built a theremin, and a very analog musical instrument, right? No keys separating the sounds. Anyway, enough. I have said enough. And Susan and Walter, thank you for KINS Networks and all of this beautiful work that we get to do together with each other. And I hope maybe you'll stay on for a moment afterwards so I can say hello.
Yeah. And Walter, I see you got on, so you stay on afterwards too, okay?
Give our afterword, Walter.
Yeah.
All right, well, to close the meeting, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to do a big thank you to Dr. Satoris for her wonderful presentation and wisdom. Thank you to Susan and Walter for co-creating this space. Thank you to Stephen Gomes and George Orbelian, both board members. Well, George is our advisory board. Steve is one of our co-founders. And just a little quick note, please, if you're not already on our mailing list, make sure you get on our mailing list. Next month, we have Elisa Gravitz, who is going to give us an update on Green America. And she is also hosting 6 KINS networks. After Susan retired and moved to Ecuador, Elisa picked up the torch and has been carrying that forward. And in the future, we are going to be unveiling even more opportunities for cross-pollination and networking. So thank you all for being part of our community. Thank you, Elisabet, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. You can unmute yourselves and say bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Go
you.
Elisabet.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
See
Aloha.
you next month.
Sending love across the miles, Elisabet. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's Kinship Earth Connections event. We encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more and get involved, please visit us at kinshipearth.org.